Let me turn the microphone. Hey, good evening. Welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show, everybody, with Mark Wallace and Charles Thomas. My co-host is still out. He is feeling a little under the weather. Not to worry, he's getting better. But when he is stronger, he'll be back with us. Hopefully, that will be sooner than later. Hopefully, we'll have him back next week. Well wishes to my co-host and my buddy, my friend, Charles Thomas. Hey, welcome to this week's edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com, where we are here live every Monday night from 7 o'clock until 9 o'clock on intellectualradio.com. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and we're on X, formerly known as Twitter. We have so much that we've got to cover tonight. And of course, what we are going to be talking about tonight is we're going to be talking about two big issues that are coming. Number one, the issue we're going to talk about, Larry Rogers Jr. and the Board of Review and what's been going on at the Board of Review that all of us have been largely unaware of. Even those of us who are in the industry of real estate, myself more than 40 years, and all of you property owners on the south and west sides of Chicago, actually in the entire county, because we are all victims to what's been going on. It's been a long standing, unfortunately, policy at the Board of Review that goes back, that predates Larry Rogers Jr., but Larry Rogers Jr. is a holdover of the Berrios regime. Berrios started out at the Board of Review. He was put there by Michael Madigan, and he became such a hack for Michael Madigan that he elevated him to the assessor's office, where, you know, there was all kinds of corruption there. And we are going to be informed and educated about it tonight. I don't have any guests coming on with us tonight. It's just going to be you and me for the next hour or so. And we're going to be talking about this. And so you can join me in the chat. You can put your comments, you can put your questions in the chat about this. This is something that most of us were far unaware of. And every time that we think that our taxes are going up, we thought that it was because of the assessor. And in part, under the Berrios regime, it was a part of the assessor, because the assessor basically had all of his henchmen at the Board of Review, so it was tightly controlled. We have a new assessor now. This is one of the reasons why they were really trying to stop Fritz Kagi. And so there are people who think that Fritz Kagi want to control the Board of Review. But what is happening here is Fritz Kagi is making us aware of what's been happening at the Board of Review. Some people are saying, well, you know, he's trying to buy control of the Board of Review. Look, Fritz Kagi is a wealthy man. Fritz Kagi made a lot of money in the financial sector, and he is using his own money. He's not raising PAC money. He's using his own money to support candidates and support these areas of importance, and he certainly has a right to do this. All these other people are people who are getting paid from people who have a financial interest. But it is not a financial interest for the general public. It's not a financial interest for you and I. It's a financial interest for them. But you and I subsidize it. So it's really an astonishing revelation of what has been going on. Absolutely astonishing as to what's been going on. And so we need to understand it. And I want to make sure that I use this time to help all of us to understand the issues that are relevant and important and that are impactful to our communities. All of them are important. None of them are not important. But I cannot think of a time where the decision that we make on March the 19th for the 800,000 property owners on the south and west sides of Chicago and on the north, homeowners, we are going to make the most important decision to either stay with the same and say that it is okay that we subsidize tax bills for commercial property owners downtown Chicago and other places like the Chicago Bears that just purchased the Arlington racetrack and got an additional $10 million reduction because of a 2-to-1 vote, Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas. And of course, Samantha Steele voted against it, but there's only 3 commissioners. They got a $10 million tax cut. That's just one of hundreds of millions of dollars in tax reductions that commercial property owners are getting. And you and I have to foot the bill. We have to pay the $10 million savings that the Chicago Bears purchased the Arlington racetrack for $194 million, and they wanted to devalue the property. They actually tried to devalue the property to $100 million because they tried to use the argument that, well, we demolished the racetrack, so it doesn't have the same value. Partly true, but it may have an increased value because maybe the value of a racetrack does not have the valuation of a different use. So this is a part of the valuations that have to go into place, but you have to have people who have the understanding of how to evaluate a property and to determine what that property's impact and long-term best use in order to help to determine the valuation of that property. Certainly, because you destroyed the racetrack and you paid $194 million for it, it didn't decrease by 50%, by more than 50%. So what has happened is that got cut, that $10 million tax cut got cut by the assessor. The Board of Review overruled the assessor and gave the $10 million tax break to the Chicago Bears. And guess what? The Chicago Bears donated more than $75,000 to Larry Rogers' campaign. So Larry Rogers really should not be voting on appeals where there's a conflict of interest. That's what the recusal is. He should have recused himself from voting on any of those appeals where there's a conflict of interest. And there's a conflict of interest because he gets thousands of dollars from these tax appeal attorneys. Now, again, let me remind you, this is an office that you and I, and many of us, most of us, were completely unaware of its inner workings. And so they would go around and have these community meetings that were disguised to help people understand how they can appeal their taxes to get your taxes lowered. You may get lowered by a couple $100, but what you don't know, in that couple $100 reduction, there was an average of $700 to $1,000 added to your tax bill every year. Hidden in there. There's no line item for it, but it's hidden in there, and you wonder, why are my taxes going up? And you think that it's the village, you think that it's the assessor. Well, I'm here to tell you, to reveal to you that we now understand what is going on. and we have to sound the alarm. And the way that we have to sound the alarm is that we can make a transformational shift in the Board of Review. We can make a transformational shift as to how our property taxes how we are subsidizing other people's property taxes, because we have one person on the Board of Review who I interviewed yesterday, and I will rebroadcast that. If you want to see that interview, you can go on my YouTube channel, Mark Wallace at The People Show, or Mark Wallace The People Show on YouTube, and you can you can take a look at that video that I did, or that interview that I did with Samantha Steele, who is the commissioner of the 2nd District, which is largely the northern end of the county, on yesterday. Eye-opening information about the recklessness of the Board of Review. She's a reformer who doesn't take any money from tax appeal attorneys. She's someone who they are mistreating in the office. They keep her from using the tax portal system. They have largely taken staff away from her. They don't allow for her to have access to any of the materials there. And they have literally no oversight at the Board of Review. They run it whatever way they want to run it. The governing body agency that provides their resources to about $15 or $16 million a year, whatever their budget is the Cook County Commissioners, where the board president is Tony Pretwinkle. Tony Pretwinkle has endorsed Larry Rogers Jr. for re-election. So they can do whatever they want to do. The commissioner, Samantha Steele, said that she wrote a letter about these concerns to the commissioners, and the commissioners said that they're going to look into it, or they're looking into it. We're going to see whether or not that is real. But what we do know is real is that you and I have found out, and we're finding out, that we are subsidizing the taxes of wealthy commercial property owners downtown and elsewhere who don't want to pay their fair share of the taxes while they own the properties. So they appeal and apply for these tax cuts. So if they buy a property and they say the property is worth $250 million, they turn right around and appeal those taxes and say that the property is only worth half that amount, so that they're reassessed, their valuations are on half that amount. They get a tax cut, and you and I pay the difference between what it was actually worth and what they're actually getting. So we're paying the taxes on the other $125 million. Whatever that amount is, it is divvied up between the 800,000 property owners, homeowners, and that goes into our tax bills, and we pay that when we pay our taxes. So it is no different than a $700 bill. That's like sending a person's family to a nice restaurant. They get to go have a nice juicy steak, lobster, wine, dessert, and they get the top shelf treatment, only they don't have to pay the bill. You pay the bill. How many people are okay with paying for someone's family once a year to go have a free meal on you? That is what it is akin to. Larry Rogers Jr. and George Cardenas are the last, or the holdovers from the Barrios regime, and they have received hundreds of thousands of dollars in campaign contributions from the tax appeal attorneys. Michael Madigan, Ed Burke. These guys are the biggest tax appeal attorneys and have made millions and millions of dollars of appealing taxes for wealthy people. Ed Burke was hired by Trump Tower. Trump Tower got a $29 million in 1 year tax cut thanks to Larry Rogers Jr., whose father used to live in Trump Tower, and George Cardenas. We're paying Trump Tower's $29 million tax cut. The 800,000 property owners, the 800,000 homeowners are paying that bill. That's what we're doing. We have the opportunity right now. We have the opportunity to reverse that cycle. Larissa Tucker, who is an assessor, who has the experience, who knows evaluations, who knows how to do evaluations. She's an assessor, was an assessor at the state level. She is running in the 3rd district. She will not take money from tax appeals attorneys. She does not take money from tax appeals attorneys. And she's a reformer. We can change this office and this practice on March the 19th. Primary elections in Chicago, in Cook County, in the state of Illinois, every 4 years, primary elections, in a presidential election, the offices that are up for grabs are chosen at the primary, largely at the primary. So most of the candidates that have opponents, and there are too many candidates that have no opponent in the election. If you look down the ballot, a lot of them have no opponent. So they're running unopposed. So they're not at risk. So all they have to do is vote for themselves and they win. So we decide elections in the primary for our local races. So the most critical office race is that of the Board of Review. The most office that has been the most obscure is now the most critical that we are going to decide on March the 19th. We can go to the polls and we can make a decision to transform that office on March the 19th and change the trajectory of what has been happening there. Larry Rogers Jr. has made millions of dollars. He's a very wealthy man, and I'm happy for him. I'm happy for him. Go make more millions in your law firm. But he's made a lot of those millions by selling our community out, by subsidizing other people's taxes, by making us pay those bills, and those lawyers refer other cases to his private firm for which he makes big money for. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. I don't have my calculator here, but let me do it the longhand. So let's say I'm going to show you the millions of dollars. I'm going to show you the millions of dollars that are made by tax appeal attorneys. This is how it works. So the tax appeal attorney appeals on behalf of the commercial property owner. The Trump Tower got a $29 million tax cut. $29 million tax cut. Ed Burke law firm, Ed Burke was the attorney who was hired by Trump Tower. Ed Burke goes and appeals before the Board of Review. He gets a $29 million tax cut. That $29 million of that $29 million, Ed Burke gets a minimum of 25%. A minimum of 25%. 25% of $29 million is $7,250,000. That's the fee minimally that he earned by getting the $29 million tax cut or tax shift. It was a cut to the Trump Tower, and it was an add to the rest of us. So you and I now have to shutter that $29 million tax bill that we have had to pay. So you and I, of that one bill, your taxes got increased for 1 year, divided by 800,000 for 1 year, and you probably didn't pay any attention to it, probably didn't know it, or say, well, my taxes went up $36.25. That's just one, but it's not one. In 2021, the Board of Review shifted 7 percentage points of the $8 billion tax levy for the city of Chicago. Just for the city of Chicago, 7 percentage points. And that was on the largest buildings that got a $500 million tax cut that was spread over the 800,000 homeowners. So $500 million. Let's look at that number, $500 million. 500 million divided by 800,000. You paid $625 more on your tax bill than that's in addition to your regular tax bill for that $500 million tax cut that was given to property owners. We paid out of our communities $500 million that just came out of our communities. That money could have been reinvested in our communities on so many different levels, but it came out of our communities, and that has been going on for decades. Barrios got replaced, but his henchman at the Board of Review, Larry Rogers Jr., is still in place. There are many people. Jesse Jackson Jr. endorsed him. Tony Pretwinkle endorsed him. Now, Tony Pretwinkle knows what's going on. Jonathan Jackson probably doesn't know what's going on. If he does, shame on him. I sent a text message to Jonathan Jackson, who is my congressman. I sent a text message to him. He hasn't responded to my text message. So starting tomorrow, I will be calling his office every day. And I will report back to you whether or not I get a return call from Jonathan Jackson Jr. I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he is not aware of this. But I want to have a conversation with him to make him aware of this and to see if he is willing to take back that endorsement. Now, let me say this. Let me put it this way. If you are a public official and you care about the health and the welfare of your community, And there is someone or groups or people that are taking money out of community, much needed revenue, much needed resources out of communities that are not rich communities to subsidize the taxes of rich property owners. Poor people don't own buildings downtown. There are no poor people that own a building downtown. Poor people don't own property downtown. So we, working class people, don't own property downtown. Teachers don't own property downtown. Waitresses don't own property downtown. Police officers don't own property downtown. You do not own property downtown, but here you're paying taxes on property that you don't own. You're now going to be paying taxes on an Arlington racetrack property that you don't own on behalf of a very wealthy franchise called the Chicago Bears. You're going to be paying their taxes. That's coming out of our communities to pay their taxes. This is something that you and I have to stand against. We have to stand against it. This is one thing that we can stop. We can stop this. It is the one time that we could make the most significant reversal of bad public policy than we have ever been aware of ever known. In one election, we can change it on March 19th. If you have not early voted, and I hope that those have early voted have voted for Larisha Tucker. If you have not voted, vote for Larisha Tucker at the Board of Review, for the Board of Review. That's who you should vote for. If you're a property owner and you don't want to pay the taxes for some property that you don't own, and you don't want to continue to pay taxes for very wealthy property owners, and you want to right the ship, you want to make it more fair, then I am suggesting to you, please go and vote for Larisha Tucker. This is real. This has been happening to us. The Board of Review, there have been many people that's been indicted at the Board of Review. Larry Rogers Jr. Had received money that was against the campaign donations ethic rules. He had to give the money back, but then in giving the money back, they went and created this super PAC where they put all that money back into the super PAC to funnel it back to Larry Rogers Jr. That's the level of corruption that is persisting profoundly at the Board of Review. I'm going to come back to this conversation because I think it is just that important. We're going to be having more conversations about this. I'll probably have or ask for the Commissioner Samantha Steele to come back on. I've had earlier today, I had David Orr. I had David Orr on with me earlier today and we talked about the different levels of corruption in terms of the money and how things politically are happening. But I want to talk about it so that you understand what's happening to all of us. This is what's happening. These are the facts. Now, if you want, I'm going to put on my Facebook page. I'm going to put on my Facebook page where you can go to the dashboard of the assessor's office and you could see the charts of the tax cuts that they give to homeowners versus the tax cuts that they give to commercial property owners. The disparity is profoundly insane. It is unbelievably of how it is that they would give you $2 and then they would give $10 to a wealthy property owners. So you save $10, but you pay $8. Or I'm sorry, you save $2, but you pay $8. That's how that is working. That's what is happening to us. We've got to stand up. We've got to get ourselves together. We've got to organize ourselves together so that we can attack problems like this and other problems of inequity in our community. This is not about personality. It is not about personality. It's about principle, is what this is about. It is about principle. If you're okay, I'd like for any of you who are watching to tell me that you are okay with subsidizing, if you're a property owner, you're okay with subsidizing somebody else's taxes, because that's what you're doing. If you're okay with that, then Larry Rogers Jr. is your person. If you're okay with everybody else subsidizing somebody else's taxes, Larry Rogers Jr. is your pick. If you're not, Larry Rogers Jr. is not your pick. Larissa Tucker is your pick. That's who we vote for. And we make a transformational shift in the way that the Board of Review functions. There needs to be, the budget needs to be broken up in the Board of Review. It needs to be broken up so that each commissioner has their own budget at the Board of Review. They need to update the antiquated software that has been there since 2015. Imagine that. Since 2015, it's 2024, almost 10 years. Your phone is out of date in 10 months. Most of you get a new phone every other year. I'm probably the only person who has, I get a phone every couple of years. And that's only if the phone goes out or goes bad. Most of you get a new phone as soon as the latest model comes out. The Board of Reviews system is in place. That's the one that Larry Rogers Jr. had put in place in 2015. Larry Rogers Jr. got elected in 2004. Larry Rogers Jr. put this system in place in 2015 and refuses to allow for it to be updated so that there is transformation, transparency, and a more accurate system in place. They need to have an operational manual as to how the Board of Review operates. They have nothing. They have no governing manual whatsoever. They do exactly what they want to do the way that they want to do it. There's no oversight at all. The Cook County Commissioners could not tell you how that office is managed. They have no say so. There is no oversight whatsoever. That needs to change. What governing agency should self-police itself and have no accountability whatsoever? Because this is what happens when you have an agency that is not accountable to anybody, that sets its own rules in place, does not have a structure in place by which they operate. Many of the people that they hire are not qualified to do evaluations. So it's nepotism. There's people who are earning $100,000, $120,000 in the office, senior people who have no qualifications in these areas. Larry Rogers Jr. doesn't have qualifications in these areas. He's an attorney. He's a personal injury attorney. He doesn't have qualifications in this area. So Larry Rogers Jr. will say to you, well, I don't make the decisions. He will tell you, I don't make the decisions. That's what Larry Rogers will tell you. My staff makes the decision. Well, the problem is his staff largely are unqualified. And it is a bunch of nonsense that his staff doesn't know who these people are. They know who the attorneys are. The attorneys are submitting these appeals. They know who the attorneys are. They know what's going on. You and I have got to make this reverse itself. We've got to reverse the cycle. We have got to, and they have one public hearing a year. They're only required to have one a year. I asked the commissioner yesterday, how many people attend the public hearing? Maybe 4 or 5, because they don't have to put it out into the public ether. They put it out wherever they want to put it out. So we need to find out, and I'm going to find out when the next public hearing is, and we need to fill that room. Well, the first thing we need to do on March 17th is to say goodbye to Larry Rogers Jr. His reign is over. He's been there 20 years. 20 years is enough. You've made millions and millions of dollars. You've made millions and millions of dollars for others. You've been their bidder. You all have done well. We've not benefited from that. It is time for that gravy train to end March 19th. Let's go to the polls tomorrow, the next day, whatever. Vote for Larisha Tucker at the Board of Review. Vote for Larisha Tucker. Vote for change. Vote for reform. That's what we have to do. We have got to bring the Board of Review under control. We can no longer ignore these offices as though they don't mean anything. Every single office in government matters, and it means something, because you and I are paying the bill for that particular agency. It has a function. We need to understand every level of what our government is doing. No longer can we look at an office and say, oh, well, it's not that important. Just like we can't look at the Water Reclamation Department. The Water Reclamation Department has a huge, I forget what the budget is for the Water Reclamation Department, but it has a budget. It actually has an important role to looking at our water systems and making sure that our water systems are good for our overall health and the future, they serve an important role. We need to know how that impacts us economically. But I'm telling you, the Board of Review, this is astonishing information that I've been learning since the new assessor has been in. But I've really, and he mentioned this to us, but it wasn't registering until I started reading what is going on with the Board of Review. Until I started looking at the actual data. And so we had to break it down to make sure that people understand this at its lowest common denominator. And its lowest common denominator is pure, plain, and simple. We're paying somebody else's taxes because they don't want to pay them, but they want to get the benefit of the value of that property when they sell that property. But they want for us to subsidize the taxes while they own it, and they get these huge cash flows and make these huge profits while they own it. And then when they sell it, they want to sell it for its fair market value, but they want to depreciate it as long as they own it. But they want for you and I to pay the bill. Please, I implore all of us, we have to stop it. We have to stop it. So I'm saying to you, make sure that you talk to all of your family, all of your friends, and have them to go and vote for change at the Board of Review. It is the most important office that we are going to be voting for in this election cycle, in our local politics. So let's get control of it. Let's put some accountability on it. March 19th. We don't need to go another cycle with Larry Rogers Jr. in office. We cannot afford Larry Rogers Jr. Larry Rogers Jr. is getting wealthy, is wealthy. I have no problem with that. But not at the expense of you, the taxpayers. Not at the expense of you subsidizing somebody else's taxes, and they're rewarding Larry Rogers Jr. by referring cases to his law firm, which we would never be able to prove it. Nor should we waste our time trying to prove it, because we have enough evidence before us now that absolutely tells us that there is a pay-to-play scheme here that you and I are subsidizing. Let's rid ourselves of that. We have to take down these improprieties one at a time when we learn about them. When we know better, we have to do better. When we know differently, we have to do differently. This is that time. Let's mobilize ourselves to the poll. Let's send a significant message to Larry Rogers Jr. and to other public officials. This is how we mobilize. This is how we organize. And we are going to vote Larry Rogers Jr. out of office. This is the 10 by 10 to win model at work. Get 10 of your friends, 10 of your family members, go to the polls together, agree to vote the same way on this one election. Not telling you how to vote on any other office locally here. We're going to talk about certainly some of the other offices and the importance of those offices. We're going to talk about that without question. We are going to talk about those. It's important for us to do that. But for these purposes, we have got to make sure that we do this. I cannot emphasize it enough. So I hope that we have explained it to you, that you understand what is going on. I'm going to continue to do that. And hopefully more people will get the information. We're going to put this broadcast back up so that you can see it again. You can always go on YouTube and see it and share it with your friends. So talk about it. Now, look, we talk about a lot of stuff. I see people on different programs talking about a lot of things that don't impact our lives. This impacts our lives greatly. Even if you don't own property and you live in these communities, you live on the South Side, you live in the southern suburbs, it still impacts you. Why? Because millions of dollars coming out of our communities that could be invested in our communities, in schools, in roads, and other things of importance in our communities, in our homes, is being taken out of our community to subsidize wealthy communities. But wealthy communities don't want to pay their fair share, or they'll put out disinformation about other policies like Bring Home Chicago, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. But we are subsidizing their taxes. And they want for us to be in an uproar about a few people who can afford to pay a little bit more to help some people in real need, to provide housing for. I don't want to get into it because I want to explain that to you later. But this board of review issue, I'm telling you, is one of the most critical issues that you can decide that will be transformational, economically transformational for our community on March the 19th. Between now and March the 19th, we march to the polls. We vote for Larissa Tucker. I got to find out what her punch number is so I can give her her punch number. And I'm going to have to put her information up going forward, because I'm going to be doing other lives besides our regular broadcast here. And maybe I'll talk with Intellectual Radio and see if they want to air some of those programs additionally, see if we can work that out, and talk with Earl and see if we can do it, because this is too important. It's so informative for our community. It is critical. It is critical for our communities. And it is high time, and we cannot afford to wait another day for our communities to start being respected by the people that we have in government. I think that with all the people that we have elected to public office just in the last 38 years that I've been in Chicago, we have gone from, I don't know, 20 or 30 people to now over I think almost 200 people elected in positions of power that seem to use their power for the interest largely of other people. You and I have got to change that. We've got to turn that around. We've got to turn it around. We have the resources, and the resources are you, me, your neighbors, your family members, others, by bringing ourselves together. We're going to talk about all of that. But this is that moment. This is that moment that we can go to the polls, mobilize ourselves to go to the poll, talk to your friends, talk to your family members. If they have questions, I am willing to come to have small meetings, big meetings, whatever we need to do to provide this information to people who may not watch this, people who don't watch this, people who won't watch this, but they'll listen to you. They'll listen to your voice because they trust you. Please, let's do this. Let's get our community informed about what's happening to us. They're taking money out of our communities to give it to people who don't need to be subsidized, making those people wealthier, making their properties more profitable, both while they own it and when they resell it. And you and I are subsidizing that. We're subsidizing that. And we get no benefit for it. None. You're getting taxed to pay your taxes, and you're also paying somebody else's taxes for a property that you don't own. That is not fair. That's not what you call equity. It's not just. Period. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to put a little pin in it for right now. I'm going to put a pin in that for right now, but we're going to come back to it. I'm going to continue to remind you about it, continue to make posts about it, because it's just that critical. Now, there's another situation that's going on out in the southern suburbs in Flossmoor, in the village of Flossmoor. Today, a lawsuit was filed in federal court on behalf of the in limbo chief, Jarrell Jones, who the village of Flossmoor hired back in March of last year, the first Black chief of police in the village's 100-year existence. While the population in the village of Flossmoor is 65% Black, 25% white, and another 5 or 6% other. Largely, 65% of the population of Flossmoor is Black. Flossmoor, very good community. People go there to move there because it has a good school district. Homewood, Flossmoor School District, put their children through good school, get a good education, good community to raise a family. I've done business in Flossmoor. I've redeveloped, I think, 4 or 5 homes in Flossmoor, financed others who are developing properties in Flossmoor. Know of people who've had to walk away from their properties in Flossmoor because in some areas of Flossmoor, the taxes are extraordinarily high. But overall, it's a good community. And so they've hired their first Black police of chiefs. The mayor is white. The village manager is white. The assistant village manager is white. Most of the staff of the village are white. I've even spoken to somebody in the village who had applied for a job at the village, and the village wanted to take her on, but she declined the job because she said, the village doesn't need any more white people. The village is made up, or the village hierarchy or the administration is not reflective of the community. So Chief Jones has come under fire. And Chief Jones has come under fire because they have what they call a strong village manager, weak mayor management model. Well, that's a bunch of word salad for me. What happens is that the mayor is new, relatively new. The village manager has been there 19 years. The village manager largely runs the day-to-day operations of the village. The mayor, not sure what the mayor does. He presides over meetings, make decisions, largely does, according to what I'm being told by people there and people in government, community people, that the mayor operates to the will of the village manager. Well, this village manager, apparently, whom I've never met, but apparently, based on every information that I have received from people who live there, people who work there, people who are involved in government there, people who have left the employment, that the village manager is the person that most people are not happy with. And she runs it with an iron fist. It's either her way or the highway. Well, that's not how you run a government. That's not the democratic process. It's not an authoritarian government. It's not a dictatorship, despite some people's attraction to that because a certain person talks like that. The public, the residents, the community has a right to what's going on, to know what's going on with its government that it funds. The public has hired a mayor. The public hired trustees. They hired trustees and entrusted them with power to hold to account government, to question government, to bring information back to the public that elected them, to tell the people what's going on. The trustees can't do that if they don't have the information. But the trustees have to develop the will to make the demands to the administration to provide them with this information. And if those policies are not in place, the trustees have to get together and to force better oversight. So Chief Jones came up under evaluation, I'm told, 90 days into his hire. And I'm told by others that the reason why Chief Jones is receiving the kinds of treatment by the village manager is because Chief Jones was somebody that they hired, that they were hoping that they could pay more money to, bring him to the village, and that he would just capitulate to whatever it is that they want to have done. Well, that didn't happen. And because he is not willing to be their lapdog, he's receiving pushback. And so what they've done is they've trumped up some these minor missteps that may very well have taken place, but they don't rise to the level of terminating. They didn't even rise to the level, he's never been disciplined. So they try to use the Flossmoor Festival as the launching pad for this. So they had a festival, and at the festival there was a teen takeover that has happened to many different villages, including Chicago. But there were no injuries, there were no shootings, there were no guns. They were able to disperse the teenagers without any incident. They claim that that was Chief Jones's fault. While it was his responsibility, it was not his fault. Chief Jones sat down with the administration, with the executive management, and the coordinating committee, and made recommendations that he wanted to see put in place in order to ensure a safer event, all of which he recommended to them, they said no to. And as a result of them saying no, even if they had said yes, it's not to say that that teen takeover would not have happened. But they could have mitigated, and they could have potentially have stopped it from happening had they had better controls on egress and regress. But they put that on the chief. Still, nothing rises to the level of dismissal because nobody was hurt, nobody was injured, no guns, none of that. Just a little bit of rowdiness of some teenagers. Mind you that the Flossmoor Festival was an economic loser, even in years past. It did not benefit to the plus, to the positive for the village of Flossmoor. It did not bring any more resources to the village of Flossmoor. It was a big day for people to have fun, cost the village of Flossmoor money. They didn't make the money back. They didn't even break even. So now they want to blame the chief. But again, that's just a cover that they want to get rid of him. So maybe they thought that they could do this and they could get away with it because it's the village of Flossmoor. There's only about 9,000, 10,000 residents in the village of Flossmoor. Who's paying attention to the village of Flossmoor? Maybe that was their thought. We hired this black man. Now, they had a police-involved shooting where a woman was killed. They contacted Chief Mitchell Davis from Hazelcrest to come over to help them with to manage the problem of this police-involved shooting. Well, I guess they thought it would be a caveat to appeasing the community by them hiring a black chief. Now, mind you, that Chief Cherrell Jones came from Macomb, Illinois. Smaller town, smaller village. He's 15 years into law enforcement. Served as a lieutenant, sergeant in community policing, in municipal. So he's got experience. They bring him from Macomb, decorated, left Macomb in good standings, highly decorated law enforcement officer. Took the opportunity that was presented to him. He was the successful candidate out of 18 applicants. They did a nationwide search for this small community of Flossmoor, a nationwide search, and he was the successful candidate out of 18. He made the cut out of 18 that the mayor decided with the village manager to hire. So if he was the successful candidate out of 18, that doesn't besmirch the other 18, but that certainly says that he must have a record of high degree, that he was the choice out of 18. Being the choice out of 18 says something to me. But they made that decision. The mayor made that decision. A Chicago police officer got wind of this, and a Chicago police officer contacted Craig Wimberly, the president of COAL, the Coalition of African American Leaders. Craig Wimberly reached out to me and explained to me that there's a problem over in Flossmoor. They've hired their first Black chief of police, and the village of Flossmoor are now trying to fire the chief of police. And Craig said, I think we need to look into it to see if we can't help. So I said, okay, can you put me in contact with the chief of police? Because I'd like to find out from the chief of police. I want to ask some very basic, some very pointed questions to find out if, in fact, they're legitimate in their claims or if there's some other motivation. The chief of police agreed to talk with me. That afternoon, I had a conversation on Saturday, or the next day, which was Saturday. I had a Zoom call conversation with the chief of police. And I asked the chief of police some very pointed questions, what I consider to be the most egregious that would rise to the level of terminating somebody from their job 3 months in, 6 months in. If it were an issue of allegations and substantiated allegations of sexual misconduct or sexual abuse or sexual assault, misappropriation of taxpayer funds, abuse of time, not reporting to work, abuse of time, or something that's unconscionable, something illegal, something completely immoral, something along those lines. I asked him those questions. If any of those are a part of your review, he unequivocally said, no, none of that exists. I don't even have a disciplinary action taken against me in my review. I said, okay, if none of this happens, what I'd like to do is to talk to other people in the community. If there's other people in the community that I can talk to that will be able to help me maybe understand from their perspective what they think of you as a chief of police and the administration. I asked him, I said, do you mind if we had conversations with other people, independent, to ask them what their thoughts were about you in the community? He said, I absolutely have no problems with that whatsoever. So I started having conversation, had conversation with other surrounding chiefs, had conversations with members of the community, had conversations with trustees, ask them questions. The trustees that I talked to had more problems with the village manager than they did with Jarrell Jones. I talked to residents, black and white, who had more concerns about the village manager than they did about Jarrell Jones. In all of my conversations, nothing that I heard any different than what was shared with me by Chief Jones. Nothing I heard in those independent conversations remotely were different or rose to the level of terminating someone from their job. So we continued to have conversation. I continued to find out that the trustees of the village of Flossmoor did not have access to information and largely were looked at as being symbolic only. I said, well, wait a minute. Are the trustees appointed or are the trustees elected? There are 6 trustees, 3 black, 3 white, and they're all elected by the full registered voters of Flossmoor, meaning they don't have districts or wards. They're elected community-wide or village-wide. So they're responsible. They're all responsible for providing information to the people of Flossmoor. So I said that the trustees have got to take a stronger position. The trustees are going to have to take a strong position of making demands for information from the administration. The administration cannot, if this is supposed to be a democratic process or a democracy, the administration can't run it as though they're CEOs and don't have to report to the trustees. That's why the trustees are there. That's why they're called trustees. So I said to the trustees, it sounds like you all are reluctant to challenge the administration, but you all have a duty and a responsibility to the voters of Flossmoor. And you are failing the people of Flossmoor if you are doing anything less than demanding reports, demanding information, especially when you have allegations of a person who holds one of the top high-ranking positions in the municipality. One of the most important positions in the municipality is that of public safety, that of community policing. In those conversations, I learned, and the common denominator came back to the village manager, Bridget Wachtal. Bridget Wachtal, who has been there for 19 years. In all of my conversations, that's where the problem came back to. So we said that we've got to mobilize as many people as possible from the community. NOBLE, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, they support Chief Jones. The villages, the surrounding villages, they support Chief Jones. They showed up on last Monday night, a week ago tonight, at the village board meeting. And I think there's another village board meeting coming up on the 25th. And we're going to show up there. And we should show up there in numbers, even those of us who don't live in Flossmoor. We should mobilize to show up there by the thousands to support the community and to support the chief and to say to the administration that we are watching. You cannot sweep this under the rug. You cannot do this in the dark of night and not have to answer for it, because that seems to me as what they tried to do. Is they tried to do this in the dark of night and send him away with a few little trinkets and do what they wanted to do, and nobody would know about it. That's not happening. The community residents of Flossmoor showed up at that board meeting overwhelmingly. I talked to the Cook County State's Attorney, Kim Fox, last Saturday. She was not aware of what was going on. We made her aware of what's going on and provided her with information. The Cook County State's Attorney showed up at that board meeting in support and to hear more. The Cook County State's Attorney did an interview with WGN the next night, raising questions. The Cook County State's Attorney lives in Flossmoor and relies on the security from the police department. One of the top law enforcement officers in Cook County resides in Flossmoor and cannot depend on the police department because she does not know who is in charge. She relies on the police department. Now, there's a deputy chief there that is probably, certainly highly spoken of by Chief Jones. And I believe his name is Taylor. His last name is Taylor. And I understand he's doing a very good job in the interim. But what we know that has come out in the wash is that the village board manager, they were supposed to have an executive meeting, and they had made an offer to the chief of police and said that he had 24 hours to make a decision. That was over a week ago. That was supposed to take place on Tuesday morning. As a result of the meeting, as a result of the outpouring of support from the community, from Noble, from other officers, that meeting was postponed by the village manager and the mayor. The village manager, even before that, sent out an email to other villages, to other mayors, other village managers, and asking them to tell their police not to show up in uniform to their board meeting. You're calling upon other villages, trying to tell them what to do, trying to make an excuse because you're now in this box. Well, they showed up. Maybe not in uniform, but they showed up. The state's attorney showed up. She's a resident of Flossmoor. She was concerned and is concerned. But if you had a legitimate claim, or you had legitimate evidence sufficient to support what you say is that this person should be terminated, you would not have canceled your meeting on last Tuesday. You would not have sent out another email suggesting that the chief was on leave. Some of the trustees thought that the chief, or it was communicated to them that he was locked out of his office. He was told not to come back to work. He's still told not to come back to work. And now it is being said that He is not fired. He's just on an extended leave. Well, this is me talking. He's on an extended leave for them to try to figure out, how do we get out of this box? How do we get out of this box? This is how you get out of the box. Realize that the jig is up. What you were trying to do will not work. And here's what you can do for reconciliation. The mayor of the village of Flossmoor, the residents had a demonstration today. They filed a lawsuit. The attorneys filed a lawsuit on behalf of Chief Jarrell Jones on this morning. And what they're asking for, in order for the village to avert a costly lawsuit that will be square on the pockets of the taxpayers, to cut your losses to, one, ask for the immediate resignation of Bridget Wachtel. Two, a complete public apology and retraction of whatever the report or whatever those findings were. Three, of total reinstatement, 100% reinstatement of Chief Jones, and that the mayor gives him the authority to manage and to run the department as he professionally sees fit. You hired him as the chief. You hired him as the chief. You don't hire someone as the chief and not give them the tools in order to govern their agency. So the mayor has the opportunity to demonstrate to the public reconciliation, contrition, to demonstrate to the public that she can earn their trust if she cares to. If she doesn't care to, then she's demonstrating that she's complicit and she's right along with the village manager and she's going to ride or die. If that's the case, then the people of Flossmoor need a consensus candidate to run and defeat the mayor next year in their local municipal elections. And that person must commit to asking for her immediate resignation or terminating Bridget Wachtel. That's it. It can be resolved. Now, if the mayor wants to be elected and wants to continue in that role, maybe she doesn't. Maybe she thinks that it's just too much for her and she'll let it go. But if she wants to be reelected, then this is the off-ramp, because she could show good faith to the citizens of Flossmoor. I can avoid a costly lawsuit by doing the right thing, reinstating Chief Jones, dismissing the village manager, a public apology, and a complete retraction. She will put herself in a completely different light with the Black community of Flossmoor and maybe Flossmoor at large. If she cares. If she doesn't care, then she will do and continue to do what she's doing, looking for a way out of this box that will be beneficial to them which does not exist. Because if it did, they would have already executed their plan. But I am of the mindset that their communications director, that their legal counsel have said to them, this is a problem. Not sure how we're going to handle it. But I can tell you, to answer this from a spiritual position, is that when you have committed a fault, don't keep digging. Don't keep digging. Acknowledge your error. Because the more you try to politicize it, the more you try to justify it, the more you are going to dig yourself into a hole. We've seen it happen over and over and over. The minute that you come out and you acknowledge that you're wrong, you acknowledge that the village manager was wrong, and the village manager could really become the vindicator of the mayor, because the mayor has the power to terminate the village manager. The village manager doesn't have the power to terminate the mayor. The village manager works at the pleasure of the mayor, just like the chief of police works at the pleasure of the mayor. And if the mayor was convicted that her position was correct, she would stand firm on that. But apparently, she's not standing firm on it because there may be a problem. And I'm using there may be loosely. There is a problem. He was supposed to have been released completely last Tuesday. Here it is another week. And now they've been waffling back and forth. Now we find out, according to them, he's not terminated. Well, why is he not terminated? Maybe he's not terminated because the mayor realizes that the village manager has overstepped. That's what's happened here. The village manager has overstepped. And the mayor is trying to figure out, how in the world can I recover from this? How do we handle this? How do we handle this that I don't make this other white woman look bad? And how do I handle this that the Black community that is in an uproar and calling for answers, and as late as today, calling for a repudiation of the village manager, a complete apology, complete retraction, and full reinstatement of the chief? The mayor is trying to figure out how to navigate this. And the best thing you can do is to confess that this was wrong and to show real leadership. As mayor, I'm going to make the decision. It is the appropriate decision to ask the village manager to resign or to terminate the village manager, because the village manager is the one who acted inappropriately, with malice, absolute malice in her position, which is antithetical to everything that they have written on their website. Let's go to their website, the Village of Flossmoor website. You go to the Village of Flossmoor's website. This is what they say in their website. So I went on their website. The mayor is Michelle Nelson. But in their website, they have a bunch of pictures, welcoming pictures, and that sort of thing. But when you go on their website, it says your government. And I went on scrolling through their website, wanting to see what is it that they stand for out in Flossmoor. Because, I've always pretty much had a pretty positive opinion of Flossmoor, and I still do, because I think the community as well. I think that what has happened here is that we're finding out there are some things in place that needed to change. I'm trying to find something I saw earlier today when I was scrolling through. Okay, let's look here. Our community, the roots of Flossmoor, Illinois, runs deep through American history. And in 1891, the Illinois Central Railroad purchased 160 acres of land. And that sort of gives that, but there was something else that I read that I was trying to get to. I can't find it. I should have saved it, but I can't find it at this right now. But anyway, let me see if I see it here. Nope. I don't want to ad lib it. I don't want to ad lib it either, but I'll find it a little later on. All right, but that's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen in the Village of Flossmoor. The mayor needs to make that decision. I know that it would probably be very disturbing for her to have to go to the village manager to say, well, hey, you've been there with me. Now I've got to, it looks like you have overstepped here. You've overstepped here. And as the mayor, I'm the mayor for the entire village. I have to make the decision. You have overstepped. What you've represented to me was not truthful, what you've represented to me. And I believed you when you presented this to me. And I supported you on it. But after further examination, there's a problem here. If we cannot continue, there's a problem. And the problem, the common denominator of the problem is you. You've overstepped. I've got to make a decision. I cannot allow for the village to be placed in a costly lawsuit that is going to cost the taxpayers thousands of dollars. And it could amount to millions of dollars that we don't have. And if we had it, it would be unnecessary. I've got to make a determination. I have to make a decision because my first job is to protect the people of Flossmoor. Number one, to protect the people of Flossmoor and to protect the resources of Flossmoor. That's my job. That's the mayor's job. And the mayor can make the decision to terminate the village manager, to reinstate the chief, to give a public apology, to completely retract that report, and to allow the chief full autonomy to do his job. That's what the mayor should do. That would be the most credible thing that she could do, to operate with character, to operate with conscience, and to operate with courage. That's what the mayor should do if she's a real leader. And if she wants to show the community, in particular the Black community, who believe and feel like they have been insulted here, as well as the trustees. That's what the mayor should do, is to offer that kind of reconciliation. To come in and say, this is it. Go call the attorneys, call the village attorney, and tell the village attorney to call Chief Jones's attorney and tell them we want to negotiate. This is what we want to negotiate. We will offer a full retraction, a public apology. We will also terminate the village manager and fully reinstate Chief Jones, give him the support and the tools that he needs to be effective, and the latitude to manage his department for the protection of the people of the village, and not set him up to fail. That's what the mayor should do. That's what the people of Flossmoor are calling for the mayor to do. Michelle Nelson, the mayor, that's what the people are calling for you to do. Do the right thing. Have the character, courage, and the conscience to do the right thing. That's what she should do. All right. Moving on. We'll keep you posted. We'll keep you posted on the developments. We'll keep you posted on and you're right, Elizabeth. The truth and righteous will prevail. The truth will come out. And we're going to keep you all posted on what's coming up. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Bring Home Chicago transfer tax. Let me tell you, the Bring Home Chicago transfer tax will only affect properties that are worth more than $1 million. It does not have any effect on properties that are worth less. Properties that sell in the city of Chicago, we pay 0.075 per $100 on which the person who purchases the property pays what is called a transfer tax to the city of Chicago. That goes to the city of Chicago. The city of Chicago, and it's a flat tax. The city of Chicago says Brandon Johnson, as mayor, has proposed a slight increase on the transfer tax for properties that sell for more than $1 million. It only affects properties that about 7% of properties in the city of Chicago are worth more than $1 million. Anybody who can afford to pay $1 million for a property is, for all intents and purposes, has some wealth and can afford to do so, and can afford to pay a little bit more in a one-time tax. It's not an ongoing tax. It's a one-time tax. I'm going to give you an example of what that will look like. All right. So bring home Chicago. I'm gonna pull out my calculator here, and I'm gonna show you an example of what this is. So what it is that it's a proposal to restructure the real estate transfer tax. Like I said, it's a one-time property tax when the property is sold, and the monies derived of that will be used to provide permanent, affordable housing for people who are experiencing homelessness. That's what the money is going to be used for. To add to whatever resources that are already available. But we need to develop more. So properties sold for less than $1 million would see a decrease. So that's for most of us don't have homes or properties that's worth more than $1 million. So if you sold your property under this new proposal, you would actually get a tax break, or the buyer would actually get a tax break. So that means that 93% of the properties sold in the city of Chicago, everybody within that group, which is most of us, would receive a tax break. About maybe a little more than 4% of properties, according to these data reports, of more than $1 million are sold in the city of Chicago. So they're projecting that every year this could bring in $100 million. Let's look at some examples of what it is today and what it would be like under the proposed real estate transit. Now, let me just reemphasize that this is not going to impact rent on property whatsoever. In fact, if it did impact rent, rents should go down because the transfer tax on 93% of properties would go down when they're sold. So that would mean if in fact it impacted rent, and it doesn't, that's just, a scare tactic. That means that the property transfer taxes would be lower for 93% of the properties that sell for less than $1 million. So that debunks that whole theory of properties that are worth more than $1 million or less, or I'm sorry, that the transfer tax is somehow going to impact the rent, like they have to pass it on to somebody else. All right. So now, so the real estate transfer tax, if you calculate how much you spend on a future property. So let's say that, let's say we put, let's see, I'm going to put in $1 million. Okay, $1 million. Okay, so, all right. Now, remember, it has to be more than $1 million. So if you have a property that sold for $1 million, you would actually get a cut. So under the current transfer tax calculation, if you sold a property for $1 million, the real estate transfer tax that somebody would pay today is $7,500. If the proposal passed, that same sale, they would pay $6,000, which means the purchaser would save $1,500. If the property was sold for $1.1 million under the calculations of the 0.075 cents per $100 would be $8,250 under the current proposal, right? I want to make sure that I got this right. I don't have my, okay, let me see. Yes. So it'd be $8,250 under the proposed tax. That person would receive a $250 reduction. The purchaser would pay $250 less. If somebody purchases a property for $1,500,000, now anybody that can afford to pay $1.5 million for a property, these are people who would be paying somewhere around $8,000-9,000 a month on a mortgage. So you have to know that somebody who is able to pay $8,000 or $9,000 on a mortgage, the number that I'm about to share with you is not going to break the bank. So if they purchase the property at $1.5 million today, under the current rate, they would pay $11,250 in a transfers, real estate transfer tax. $11,250. Under the proposed real estate transfer tax, that same sale they would pay $16,000, which would be a $4,750 difference. That money will go to the fund for homeless people, right? Or to build affordable housing. Now, mind you, if they raise $100 million, that means that they can float a bond that would be able to give them more money to finance building these affordable homes. And they would be able to use the revenue generated from the transfer taxes to pay the financing to build more affordable housing and to build affordable housing for the unhoused, to make sure that we have people housed. Now, I have always contended that we need to do more. We have plenty of property on the south side, on the west side, that's been vacant for years. And it's not been vacant because people didn't want to do it. It's been vacant because the cost of renovating these properties properly exceed what those properties would actually be valued at. And what we need to do is we need to have a grant subsidization to renovate those properties the way that they need to be, so that could be gap funding between what a bank would provide and subsidize from the government to put those properties back on the market, so that those properties can then generate revenue, provide housing, and they would be put back on the tax rolls, where the municipality and the community can benefit from those properties, as well as we could get rid of blight that has been in the communities. There are plenty of properties in the suburbs. I'm sorry, on the south side. Plenty of properties that are vacant on the west side in our communities. We could revitalize those properties and provide adequate homes. Now, we also have to make sure that these properties are properly managed, because you have to have people to understand how you have to live. You can't just live any kind of way that you want to. You can't just, because you think this is your space and you're paying rent, you can do whatever you want to do. You can play music as loud as you want to play it. You can smoke, do whatever. You cannot impugn or infringe on the quiet enjoyment of your neighbors. So that's a part of management, of making sure that people respect the property and respect their neighbors. All of that has to be put into place, and all of that has to happen. Somebody has to manage it. Properties end up going into disrepair when they're not properly managed, when you don't have preventative maintenance programs in place. I learned this a long time ago, is if you properly maintain your properties, you will not end up paying huge costs in repairs. When something is broke, fix it. It costs less to fix it now than it would be to wait, to allow for it to pile up and for something else to join and something else. And it goes worse, worse, and worse and worse. So I believe in all of my properties, that is it. When something that I'm responsible for, I need to make sure that it's taken care of, that there is no deferred maintenance on properties. One, your tenants are going to appreciate it. You're going to have tenants who are not going to be delinquent on the rent and complaining, and which attracts all sorts of other things. So these are things that we could put into place. And what the mayor needs to do is to need to make sure that he has people in his administration who understands this. I'm not looking for a job, but he needs to make sure that he has people in place that understands this. So this is a good thing. So I would encourage you to please vote to support the Bring Home Chicago. There are two critical things on the ballot: the Board of Review, Bring Home Chicago. Bring Home Chicago, all of the deception that they've put out there about Bring Home Chicago, that it's going to raise your rent, is completely false. And if people are raising your rent, that means that they're just taking advantage of the situation, because it has nothing to do with current owners. This only impacts people who are purchasing property. So this happens when a property is sold, period. It's a one-time tax. Once a property that is worth more than $1 million, more than $1 million and under, you are not paying. I think it's, what is it? Goes to, I think it's, let me see what it is, where you start to pay the increase. Let me see what that is. When you start to pay the increase, I'm just doing the model. 1 point. Okay, so it starts at 1.2, 1.2, somewhere around there, $1.2 million. All right, so if you're not buying a property, first of all, if you can afford to buy a property at $1.2 million, I guarantee you the little difference that you're paying in that, you're not going to be complaining about. You certainly should not be, because it kind of reminds me of sports. I hardly have any, well, I have none, anybody who is playing a professional sport, whether it be basketball, football, baseball, whatever, of making $1 million a year or more, who is complaining, is an ungrateful person. I have no sympathy for people who are arguing that their contract is not bigger than the next person, and they're all making millions of dollars. None. And you're playing a game. You're playing a sport. I don't even get into those conversations. Now, I get into some other conversations, but not that one. All right. So, but my point is that if somebody making $1 million a year crying about paying a little bit more to help people who need the help the most. Now, why should we be arguing about this? Now, are we going to argue about wealthy people paying a little bit more to help poor people, but we find no problem than poor people and working class people subsidizing the taxes for wealthy people. I knew I would be able to get back to it. But this is the analogy, that you have people who are defending the interest of people that they are not on the same level. Not that we're begrudging anybody who is wealthy. I don't begrudge anybody who is wealthy. But I believe that people who are doing better have a responsibility that's greater to help people who need the help the most. And this idea that somehow people who are doing well, if you ask them to pay their fair share, they're going to pack up and leave. And I would say, bye, because we have no benefit from them now. We are subsidizing them now. All right, listen, that's going to do it for this week. I just want to remind you all that it's really important. It's really important that you know what's going on, right? You get the information, and I promise you that I work very hard to make sure that I'm bringing you the accurate information. You can go and fact check me. I want you to go do that. Get the information. Fact check. I'm going to post this information on my page where you can go and you can research this information. That is on the Board of Review. That is on the transfer, the real estate transfer tax, the Bring Home Chicago. And of course, the information that I shared with you about what's happening out in Flossmoor. These are all attacks on all of us. When these kinds of things these are systemic problems. This is what we call the systemic racism that's embedded in policy. It's embedded in policy, and we cannot allow for this to continue. Because if we allow it to continue when we know better, then that means we're saying that it's okay. Do not adjust to abnormalities as though that they are normal. Don't adjust to them as though they are normal, right? Let's do our part and try to make things on balance, more equitable, more fair, and that our communities are not always the communities that people are victimizing. All right, that's going to do it for me this week on this edition of The People Show. Look for some of the special podcasts coming up. We're going to be having a judicial roundtable that I want to be putting together with a lot of the judicial candidates that are running for in the judicial areas. I'm going to have attorney at law Wendy Williams is going to be on, and some of the other candidates that are running for trying to become a judge in the county of Cook. And so we want to see and hear from more of those people. So we're going to be having that roundtable that you'll see. Just watch out for the promotions of that sort of thing. You've seen me now doing some live promotions. I'm going to continue to do that on Facebook because I think they're probably more effective and they give people more information. So you're going to see more of that coming up. All right, keep my co-host Charles Thomas in your prayers, and hopefully that we will see him back with us next week and in some of the upcoming podcasts to go. But until that time, thank you all for tuning in to this week's edition of The People Show on intellectualradio.com, Facebook Live, YouTube, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Thank you all so much, and good night.